Hello, my name is Jason McBride, and I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this evening for what should be an engaging conversation on how we can prepare the next generation of leaders through the pursuit of racial justice and equality. And thank you for submitting so many thoughtful and candid questions for our panelists leading up to the event today. The objective for the event today is really simple. Our panelists will share and explore different perspectives on how to dismantle inequities and advocate for Black lives across various industries such as entertainment, government, healthcare, technology, finance, and sports. But make no mistake, this isn't a platform where we're going to gripe or complain, but we're really going to focus on a call to action. We're going to tackle these sensitive issues head on and focus on how we can bring about true positive change. And speaking of panelists, we're fortunate and very blessed to have a distinguished group of individuals tonight, including Chris Bridges, most of you probably know him as Ludacris, Senator Cory Booker, Mayor London Breed of San Francisco, Dr. Regina Benjamin, former U.S. Surgeon General appointed by President Barack Obama, Devo Harris, three-time Grammy winner and co-founder of Good Music with Kanye West. Unfortunately, Jay Williams couldn't be here, but we're grateful Brian Westbrook, star NFL running back and Philadelphia Eagles Hall of Famer, could join us today. So before we actually officially dig in, I just want to take a minute to thank our sponsors, Lightspeed, Venture Partners, and KidNation. None of this would have been possible without their commitment and support. Lightspeed is a global venture capital firm that's focused on investing across the enterprise, consumer, and healthcare sectors. And over the past 2 decades, the Lightspeed team has backed hundreds of entrepreneurs and founders and helped build more than 400 companies around the world, including companies that you probably know, such as Snap, Nest, Nutanix, AppDynamics, MuleSoft, Guardian Health, and Grubhub, just to name a few. KidNation is a one-of-a-kind interactive platform for children to enjoy engaging, kid-centric, educational entertainment, and it's founded by Chris Bridges along with his partner Sandy Law and Gloria Pico. The organization's mission is to educate kids about current events through the use of music, made for kids by kids. It will officially launch on November 12th, so be sure to stay tuned. So now that you have a little bit of information about the purpose and the panelists, I think it's officially time to jump in. What I want to do right now is turn it over to my co-moderator, Mercedes Bent, partner at Lightspeed, to kick off the first question. Mercedes, over to you.
Thanks, Jason. As we all know, the recent protests have highlighted the ways that Black Americans are disadvantaged, both economically and professionally. For me, the June protests were a watershed moment in my life because for the first time, I saw all my friends, white, Asian, Indian, Latino, Indigenous, really the entire nation, grappling directly with and speaking out about on issues of race. Many posted a Black square for Blackout Tuesday, and there was a lot of talk about whether that was enough or if it was performative. Chris, I'd like to initially direct this first question to you. You've been very active in the community and even attended George Floyd's memorial. Why is it important for you to have songs made for and performed by kids like Get Along about racial unity and Get Out the Vote about the important civic duty surrounding the act of voting? And how does this address where we are at with the current state of racial inequities in America?
Yeah, man, I'm trying to do all that I can. You know, I know with great power comes great responsibility. So, you know, creating this platform was extremely important to me. I have 3 daughters of my own. They ask a lot of questions. So, you know, we all know that parents are going through a really difficult time right now because of all the, you know, they need supplemental edutainment, as I like to say. But in terms of, you know, the pandemic and schools being virtual and just all the racial issues, it was just important for me because the kids ask so many questions and it creates this dialogue that can help parents to better talk to their children, especially with what's going on. So I created the song Get Along, you know, because everyone is being affected by what's going on with Black Lives Matter, everyone. And sometimes I think as parents, we try to shield them, which is good, depending on, you know, how old they are from certain things. But, you know, our children know and understand a lot more than I feel like we give them credit for sometimes. So the message is simple with that particular song. It's like we need it more now than ever is love, and just to encourage everybody to lead with love. So I'm kind of, you know, we fight on different fronts, and some people are fighting in one way, and, you know, I'm fighting in different ways, and I'm just trying to kind of mold and try and help shape the new generation and their line of thinking and how we can not have issues like this in the future, or try my best. That's literally all I can do. And as far as like Get Out the Vote, this is a song about the importance of voting. This is, you know, probably the most important election of our lifetime. And so the same thing with the kids asking questions. You hear it all over the radio. You hear everyone talking about voting. They just want to understand why. You can start talking to them. So you instill it within them. And literally, as they grow up, they know how important it is. So when it comes time that they are legal, are able to, it's just like it's second nature. They know that this is something that's extremely important, and they know they have to do it for themselves and for the ones that come after them the same way that their parents should be doing right now. So again, Kid Nation is a game changer, and I'm glad you said we launched November 12th, or the week of November 12th. We're getting everything together now because I just feel like this is going to be something that I've been working on since before BLM, since before COVID hit, and now it's needed more now than ever because of what we've been working on. So I'm just very proud of it.
I love that you said that, lead with love. I think you're right, completely right there. And Dr. Benjamin, what about you in terms of where you think things are at with the current state affairs?
Well, when I was in office, we released the first ever national prevention strategy. And one of the pillars of that strategy was to eliminate health disparities. And we've been working on health disparities for years. But back in January, when COVID-19 hit, it really brought this to light much more than we expected. We expected people with underlying illnesses and diseases to be affected more. What we thought about was cancers and people with being on oxygen and things. We didn't think about people with diabetes and high blood pressure and an irregular heartbeat, that they would be the ones that would be coming in sicker. And African Americans came in the hospital showing up sicker, getting much sicker faster and dying much more often. And it wasn't because we're African Americans, it was because of the social determinants of health. And as we know, your zip code is a better predictor of your health and longevity than your genetic code. And we're seeing those things. We knew that your transportation, your housing, your availability of good, healthy foods, all those things impact your health. But COVID-19 brought it to light much more starkly. And we also see that these are the same things happening in rural communities. The same sort of social determinants are there. So they're there. And that was one of the things that the state of affairs. But before I switch, one thing I want to say with Kid Nation is that if I don't get a chance to say this again, is that we need more young African American kids going into health careers. While 30% of our population is minority, less than 7% of the nation's physicians are minority. And we see the same percentages for nurses and pharmacists. And these are percentages that were the same during the Flexner report in the 1800s. So we really need more minorities going to health careers.
Thank you for those thoughts. And I think that's a great message. We completely need more people of color in healthcare. Thank you both for these insights. And now that we've got a little bit of the lay of the land, would love to dive into how we can advocate for social justice and equality. For this topic, I'd like to pivot to Senator Cory Booker. Unfortunately, he was pulled away last minute and isn't able to join us live, but we have the following message that he wanted to share.
Hi, it's United States Senator Cory Booker, and I join with you in the cause of our country. Make real on its promise to everyone. We see now a nation whose criminal justice system is deeply, deeply discriminatory against African Americans at every step of the process, from traffic stops to sentencing, to treatment in prisons, and the challenges that come with the collateral consequences after someone is released from prison. We know there's no difference between blacks and whites for using marijuana, say, but African Americans are almost 4 times more likely to be arrested for it, incarcerated for it. And as a result of this war on drugs, which is really a war on people, disproportionately black and brown people, we know that lives are devastated, families are left in financial disarray or ruin, and we know what it does to entire communities in our country. I could go on. There are so many challenges, but the question is what are we doing about it? All of us have an obligation to be a part of this fight, not just to say Black Lives Matter, but to fight for the laws that will actually represent that. I've worked in the Senate to pass legislation that has made a difference. From the First Step Act, which is the first major criminal justice reform bill, one that I helped co-author, that has helped to liberate thousands of people who were unjustly incarcerated, change our sentencing laws, and more. I was the author of the Fair Chance Act, which helps people coming out of prison. The number one employer in our country is the federal government and its contractors, and actually to ensure that when they come out of incarceration, that people have a fair shot at getting jobs. They don't have to check a box that says that they have a past criminal conviction, but actually can get a fair shake at being evaluated on who they are, the character, and the qualifications. I also am fighting for more. Things like the Justice and Policing Act that will actually ban practices that led to the killing of Eric Garner, that led to the death of Breonna Taylor. They can hold police officers accountable when they do things that are horribly, horribly wrong. We have a lot of work to do, and I will continue to fight in the Senate. But what I am hopeful about is that we all understand that change doesn't usually come from Washington. It comes to Washington by people who demand it, to our state houses by people who demand it, from civil rights to voting rights to fair housing. All of these causes came from the activism and the engagement of people. As we know from Frederick Douglass, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. I'm honored and proud to be with you in struggle, to be with a growing movement in this country for racial justice. This we must continue until we make this nation truly who it says it is, a nation with liberty and justice for all.
No struggle, no progress. I completely agree with that. And I think what I'm really hearing Senator Booker say is that to make real change, we have to each engage in our own ways and start making changes in our own sphere of influences. For example, I'm a venture capitalist, and I've tried to do this at Lightspeed by launching an angel investing program that puts more dollars in the hands of Black and brown people, since there's only 3% of VCs that are Black or Latino. So I'd like to talk to each of you about how you're taking steps in your respective fields to bring about positive change. Brian, let's start with you.
Well, thank you, Mercedes, and good evening to everyone. You know, when you talk about change in our respective fields, I am a part of that Scout program with Lightspeed Venture Partners, and the program is designed to get money into the hands of minorities that help. You know, and part of my thesis as an investor is to go out and invest in our community, invest in the people that look like us, and to make sure that they have same or similar opportunities as others out there in our community. So that's one part. The other part that I think we're all charged with is because we all have our own platform. We all have our own ability to affect change in our own separate way. I was able to play in the NFL for a long time, and because of that, now I'm able to go and speak to schools, to speak to different corporations, speak to different people along the way, and tell them, of course, about my story, but also explain to them why it's so important for people that don't look like us and myself to help us, help others, and make sure that it's all inclusive and not saying, okay, that group, they're on their own. They have to figure out things for themselves. About 15 years ago, I bought a horse farm. And at the time, it was probably a terrible investment. Still is a bad investment. It's not a money-making situation. But now we've been able to, with my wife and I, have been able to start the Brian Westbrook Foundation. And the goal of the foundation is pretty simple. We found that a lot of brown people, a lot of Black people are just not as good in school. And those people that are good in school, we want to push them. We want to give them all the things that they need to make sure that they continue being successful in school. We want to teach them financial literacy. We want to teach them real estate planning, estate planning. We want to teach them all the different things that they could use as they go on with college and post-college graduate degrees, things like that. But then there's another set of children that sometimes are not as good in school. We want to teach them vocational training. How can you become a carpenter and make millions of dollars, make $1,000? And how can you be an electrician? How can you be a plumber? We want to teach them agricultural skills so that you can grow your own food and things like that. We want to teach them the value of owning land. I mean, if we can teach our kids those types of things, those principles, they can be successful. One of the biggest things from our view is teaching our kids the equation to success. This is what we teach them all. We believe that hard work plus discipline plus sacrifice and dedication is going to be, you'll be successful if you can do those types of things. And the truth is you can be successful on any avenue of life if you can simply do those things. The biggest part, and I think everyone would agree, you can be very successful football player, doctor, lawyer, but you can be just as successful plumber. You can be just as successful carpenter. But here's the key. You can make $1 million. And if you spend $1,001,001, you're unsuccessful because at that point you're broke. Conversely, you can make $50,000 a year. You can save $10,000. You can pay all your bills. And that is what I would consider a success. We have to teach our kids that and educate them in those types of issues. And that's kind of what we're doing with our foundation. And we're using the horse farm and the horses to be able to teach that along the way. And that's kind of where we're at as far as helping our community in the space that we have at this point.
Thank you,
Like
Brian.
that.
That's amazing.
Like
Devo, what about you?
Well, I'll tell you a super quick story. When I first started my entrepreneurial journey many years ago, I met with this top tech attorney at the top tech law firm. I was showing him all this amazing stuff that we're doing and our very ambitious plans. And he said, this is great. This is super impressive, but no one's going to invest in you. No investor will invest in you. Your story is too different. You look too different. And it was just shocking to me. And this was many years ago, but there was some truth to what he was saying. So at Adventure, the company I currently run, one of our priorities is having very visible wins. So we want to both have visible wins and we look to champion and celebrate other people of color in their wins. So the Blavities, the Hollers, like all of these and line technologists and engineers at different companies, any successes we try to bring to light. So that we can change that narrative. And the gatekeepers, if you will, whether that's the hiring managers, buyers, investors, can start to change that model and that concept. And also so that we can inspire other people that look like the people on this call to get involved in our space. So that's baked into our DNA, that's baked into our systems, that's baked into our operating manual. So, that's our little part of this mission.
Can I jump in? Can I ask you just how do we get our young people to stop being great consumers and start to be?
How do we get them to be not just great consumers, but great creators, I think is what you were saying. Absolutely. I think that's something. Do any of the panelists have thoughts on that?
I mean, that's part of the reason of when I say I'm fighting in a way in which trying to, mold those young minds so that we can start to do that. Obviously, you can talk to kids of any age and try to get them to understand it. But when you start at a very early age, when they're still impressionable, that's kind of why I'm fighting the fight in that area. And like I said, even with the, we have a video called Stay Clean that we had before COVID, and we decided to put it out because you could tell your kids to wash their hands all the time. But if you put it in a manner in which they're singing along to this song all the time, and they're listening to it over and over again, the same way they might listen to some of the stuff we hear on the radio right now that might not be the content we want them to listen to, but this is their own safe bubble and they can listen to it and catch along, then it makes them want to do things. Like, say, for instance, it's not on the site now, but I have a song talking about doing chores, and there's a video, and in the video, the kids are doing the chores, and at the end, they get rewarded with like a party. And so my kids watched it one time, and they pulled a stool up to the sink and started doing dishes. I was like, what are you doing? They were like, our birthday's coming up soon as well. We want to be able to get rewarded for doing our chores as well. So, I know I keep, talking about KidNation and how I'm doing certain things, but And by the way, everybody, once you're done with this, you should definitely go on KidNation.com and check out these videos and make sure that you become a part of the family, because like you said, we launch in November. But my part in terms of answering your question is to try to mold them very early into understanding that we are business owners and this is what we can do. And when you start to do it like that, then I feel like it's a lot easier than trying to convince someone who's already been so much of a consumer. That's really that would be my answer on that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, another thing that I think will help our children a lot is for our successes to share their stories. I mean, we know what Chris does. We know what football players do. We know what basketball players do. And so many of our kids want to do that because that's what they see all the time. They see drug dealers too. And that's they see the success that some drug dealers have. And obviously the downfall is that they don't recognize when they go to jail or they're getting injured or killed in the streets. You know, I have a neighbor. And so the kids in my neighborhood, they're always at my house. They love football players. They love the stories that I tell. And they think that I have the most money in my neighborhood. It's just not true. One of my neighbors who never shares a story, and the really only reason that I even know about this is because I sat down and talked to him. But he makes great money and makes way more money than I ever made in my career playing football. But he never shares his story. And his real story is simple. He started with one trash truck, and he told the owner of the company that I'll go work for you for free. Just let me use the trash truck at night. And so he developed his own route and was using the trash truck at night. And over the course of time, he continued to get more and more customers. And then at that point, he stepped out on his own. And then he began to have his own trash routes and his own company. He just built a company slowly but surely. But the point is that nobody would know because he never wants to share it. He never wants to go out there and say, hey, this is what I did to be successful. And that's because he's a private person and all those things. But if we want to impact our children, we have to give them a goal. We have to give them that carrot to go look at, to go out there and do it. And unless we share that story, unless we share those moments that we've been successful, then they probably don't have the thing to look at and say, I can be that. That's why it was so important for President Obama, because we can be that. I can go do that. That's why it's so important for the many things that we're doing in our community. We have to share. We have to make sure that we have our children, our younger generations involved in that as well, because that's going to teach them where they can go and what they can do.
Wow. Yeah.
I would just add with medicine, many people think it takes too long to become a doctor. Well, it takes 4 years of college and then 4 years of medical school. If you're going to get a degree in college is 4 years, a master's is 2 more, and a PhD is 2 more. It's the same. It's not that much longer. And it's a great investment. It's a better investment in yourself than it is to invest in the stock market, because you know that you can produce. So I still want to encourage people to go in the health careers. So.
I love these stories of how we can really inspire people to create. And I think you're so right. It starts young, Chris, and Brian, I think you're right too. We have to be more comfortable with sharing our successes and not just keep them personal. And Jason, I believe you were going to ask Mayor Breed a question about legislation as well, in terms of more of sharing some of the work that she's doing as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, so just to piggyback off of that, so it's really interesting that what we're dealing with now are trying to find creative solutions across the board. And I just want to sort of focus now on potential solutions that can exist, maybe in the form of legislation. And this is going to take us to our next question, which is the following. Protesters across the United States have taken to the streets to demand police reform. Mayor Breed, you recently signed the budget for the city of San Francisco for fiscal year 2020 through 2022, which includes $120 million divestment from law enforcement that was allocated towards the city's African-American community. Can you explain a little bit about why you decided to support that reallocation of funds, and how do you think it will benefit the citizens of San Francisco going forward?
Well, I just want to start off by saying that, a lot of the stories from some of the members of the panel really resonate with me because, I didn't expect to be mayor. And you didn't look out there and see Black women who are mayor and think this is a path that I'm going to travel down. And in fact, you're seeing African-American women all over the country step up and set an example. And I do think that examples are important. What you see is what you can be. And I'm fortunate that I'm in a position like this, especially because I grew up in poverty. I grew up in public housing. I've lived the experience that I'm trying to change. And I think the biggest frustration I've had and why I pushed the policies that I've pushed is because I am tired of being alone. I don't want to be the only exception. I miss my friends and my family members who are behind bars and who I have lost to the criminal justice system, to drugs, and folks who have been killed in my community, the community that I still live in. And part of what's so important is when you have the ability in a platform like this to make change, that this is what you have to consistently do. It's not just about, of course, policy, it's about investments. And it's about having the courage to call it out for what it is. In liberal San Francisco, we see disproportionately how African Americans are impacted. We know what the numbers are. It's embarrassing. I'm mayor, I'm a Black woman, and it's embarrassing that we have less than 6% of an African American population in San Francisco, but about 37% of the homeless people are Black. Almost 50% of our kids don't even graduate from high school. Almost 50% of the people, Black people in San Francisco, represent the use of force cases that happen. We look at every health disparity that exists in San Francisco, and Black people are overrepresented. And it's no different throughout the rest of the country. So what are we doing about it? We can't just keep putting out policies and say, here's a policy for people of color. Here's a policy that supports minority communities. Right. Because minority communities aren't doing as bad as a lot of African American communities. So that's why before this pandemic hit, before what happened sadly with the tragic killing of George Floyd, before all of that happened, we were making investments here in San Francisco, and I was unapologetic about calling it out for what it needed to be called out for. We are making these investment and these policy changes to serve Black people because we should not be comfortable with what we see happening in San Francisco, in liberal, progressive San Francisco, to Black people. And so when I started to, put forth a lot of policies, of course, it's met with, what about me? What about my community? What about this? What about that? And look, I'm a mayor of a major city, and I'm here to take care of the entire city. But I also need to make sure that I'm just not talking about the numbers, that we're putting our money where our mouth is. Right. So when I made the decision to remove $121 million from the police department's budget to the African American community specifically, I was making a statement. I was making a statement to say that we need to change. And also, we're going to make a deliberate investment. We're going to look at universal income for Black people. We were talking about reparations and having a number of conversations about what that would mean in terms of home ownership, universal income, economic opportunities, economic stability. It's what's going to change and save lives. I want to make sure that what happened to me and my family and my friends growing up in this city doesn't continue to happen to the small African American population that we have left in this city. We're still seeing, the violence. We're still seeing the hopelessness and the despair. And the difference is we have someone in office that has lived through it. So when this pandemic hit, it wasn't even a question. We put aside over $3 million specifically targeted at African American businesses. We embedded an equity outreach plan in our COVID response to reach out to the communities where mostly are predominantly African American, to make sure that they were prepared and they were getting tested and they knew we were taking the resources to them. So making sure that we are meeting people where they are, and it's not a one size fits all minorities, because policies for African Americans sometimes can be different than the policies for everyone else. I changed the policy around housing in this city because in the Black community that used to be Black that I grew up in, people would say, we want to build affordable housing. They would build affordable housing. And then all of a sudden, people, my family members, my friends, nobody from the community would get access to those units that we have supported being built in our community. So I put forward neighborhood preference legislation, making sure that 40% of all new units built in a community goes to the people who live there first, so that they have a real shot of accessing those units. So it's really about getting deliberate, about getting creative, about making investments and being unapologetic, because I think sometimes Black leaders or Black elected officials, They feel like they have to cater to everyone else, and they have to be very careful about what they do and what they say about Black people. And I'm not careful about that, because my goal is to change things. If we have a thriving African-American community in San Francisco, we have a thriving San Francisco. And we can't apologize for the need to be bold and brave about changes to those policies. And lastly, I'll say, we also need to make sure that the community decides what's best for them. These ideas are coming from the people in the neighborhoods to say we need universal income. We need down payment assistance for housing. We need to change this, not just give money to nonprofits that aren't necessarily delivering for people, putting that money in the hands of the people who need it the most so that we can uplift our communities.
That's excellent feedback. And as a Bay Area native, you could see the direct impact of that change, right? So I think that is something that is desperately needed. And you're right, we can't apologize for making the necessary changes. And so what I want to do is ask Devo, what's your feedback to that, Devo? Because I know you're involved in your community. You're on the East Coast. What are your thoughts on that, about some of the policy?
I think it's amazing. It's inspiring. It's proactive. It's right what we need. I think it's a model for civic infrastructure that more cities and states should follow, and it's super exciting. And I think that the last point that the mayor made is one that we should all really keep in mind, and people outside of our immediate communities should keep in mind, that as we invest in Black communities, and especially in San Francisco as that example, as you lower homelessness, as you increase education rates, you're increasing job opportunities, you're increasing average income, you're increasing tax revenues, you're increasing the quality of life overall. So investing in Black communities is really investing in all of our communities. And so I think people should really keep that in mind as we look at investment in Black community, and people outside of our communities may have some tension around that. We should really sort of underline that it's really investing in you. Like, this investment is helping you. So I'm super excited and inspired.
That's really, really good feedback. I'm not sure if any other panelists have any feedback, but if not, what I'll do.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm not like any other doctor, have an opinion about everything, but
Go ahead, feel free.
So Mayor Breed is an example of the type of leader that we need, and a strong leader, and what a leader can really do and set the tone for things. But she can't do it by herself. And so I want to make sure that people know that she needs people to back her, and other leaders like her need our support. And just the fact that I'm really proud of the fact I'm on the board of Kaiser Permanente. We were really pleased to support the homelessness and other programs, but we really need to stay behind them and support her, because she'll be out there by herself being attacked, and she needs our backing.
Great point. That's an excellent point. I think what we want to do now is sort of make a sort of quick pivot, because I think essentially what's going on now is that how our cities and communities function in the midst of racial, health, and economic disparities, it's obviously going to be top of mind for a lot of adults throughout the United States, and that's not going to go anywhere. However, I think, as we mentioned before, a lot of these same issues have the ability to really impact children of all ages. So if you guys don't mind, I just wanted to really quickly pivot back to that for a second, because personally, I'm seeing a lot more of these issues that I can't solve for. So I'll give you guys a quick example, and you can tell me what you think. A few months ago, my oldest daughter, Addison, wanted to know if there was a way to sort of distinguish and differentiate between a good police officer and a bad police officer. A few years ago, that question wouldn't have been on her radar. And so the reason why I'm bringing that up as a point to sort of discuss is the fact that the events of 2020 and beyond, obviously they're going to have an impact on our youth. This question is for Chris. You recently launched KidNation, or it will be launched in November, which teaches kids about current topics such as COVID and racial equality. Wanted to ask for your opinion on, do you have any advice to the viewers at home as to how they can begin to frame and discuss some of these challenging issues with their kids, even if the adult or the parent really doesn't have the answers? Because a lot of times I'm finding that we don't have the answers all the time as a parent, and sometimes we're we're struggling to find the answers, but we still want to have those conversations with our kids. So do you have any feedback on how parents can start to have these conversations that are extremely challenging to deal with?
Yeah, I think a lot of times just, even creating the conversation helps because, I think with even my oldest daughter, it helps me if we are watching movies and, movies that can create questions for her to ask me in real life situations and things of that nature. So I took that type of, I took that and I was like, okay, now how do I do this with my younger kids? And so again, that's kind of what Kid Nation is about. It's like, if you have a topic that could be slightly controversial, but you show it in a good way, but it brings about so many different great questions for them to ask you, then the conversation begins. And I think, as we all say, even we're here today, this is something that can spark the change right here just by us having these types of conversations, and it really gets us all to thinking. So I just feel like there are numerous ways to do it, and I think that when you look at all of the different subject matters that we have on this site when it launches in November, you'll be very surprised, because another reason is because we have all these single parent households. We have kids that are asking so many different questions, and I feel like there's ways to teach them about morals, about all these different things that they're thinking about, and showing it in positive images and positive ways, just so that we can be an advocate for the change that we want to see in the world. And it's just like more young people are doing this already, and them, I just really think that it's lending out a platform for kids that want to speak up, and I'm lending my voice to speaking about it here today. And I just think this conversation is great, and creating conversation for all ages is going to lead to something. So that's just, I 100% feel that way. I feel very strong about it.
That's a really good point. It's about having those difficult conversations, but in a creative light, taking a new approach so that kids can really start to dissect what these issues are that we're dealing with. Mercedes, did you want to pivot to the next question? Because I know that we want to get through more of these questions as quickly as we can to make the best use of time.
Sure, yeah, and appreciate everybody's responses. This is such an interesting conversation. And the next thing I wanted to ask you about, Dr. Benjamin, was about, we can't look at COVID-19 pandemic in a vacuum. As you talked about earlier, the health disparities that we're seeing, unfortunately, tend to affect people of color. We know that studies have shown that people of color, especially Black people, are more likely to have diabetes, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease. And these diseases all, of course, have higher mortality rates when combined with COVID. So what factors do you feel are behind this disparate treatments? And given the magnitude of the issue, how do we address this?
So we've done a lot of studies and research, but it all kind of comes down to the social determinants of health. Those are the everyday, daily living activities that we live in, the housing, the transportation, our education, our availability of quality, affordable foods. Those are the things that really underlie our basic healthcare, our stresses, our mental health, the things that we're dealing with. And it even goes beyond that to our jobs, our incomes. Your financial health is directly related to your physical health. And so we need to address all of these things. And whenever someone ever asked me if there was one thing you could do to improve the health care of your community, because I'm in a little small community in Alabama, it is education. It is, if you could just educate our children more. We know that a high school diploma increases your life expectancy by 2.5 times than not having a diploma. Keeping everything straight, the same. So just basic education matters. So those social determinants are the things that we have to get a handle on. We're using words like systemic and all of these other things, but basically these are the things we live with every day. And while we're doing that, in the meantime, I want people to not get despaired. There are things you can do to improve yourself and to make help yourself, particularly around COVID time. The 3 W's: you wear your mask, watch your step, and watch your distance. But also make sure you get enough sleep, get enough rest. And don't forget the behavioral issues. Talk to people. If you're having depression or just feeling sad, call a friend. And if a friend's not there, call another friend. Those things are so important because you'd be surprised at how much your cortisol level goes up when times of stress like this. And just little things like exercising. We love to dance. We like to have fun. Do things that are fun and enjoyable.
We have a song for every single thing you just talked about, by the way, on Kids. Exercise, how to handle when you feel bad. Man, I cannot wait for you guys to check out this platform. But sorry about that. But yeah, everything you said is 100% on point.
Amazing. I love that. And I love what you said, Dr. Benjamin, too, about education being a key. I've spent the last 8 years of my career prior to venture working in the education field. And I think it's so key that we teach our children how to be healthy, how to start out early. And this starts at the earliest ages, at the early childhood. You know, Mayor London Breed, you have worked on a project, the Abundant Birth Project, in partnership with Expecting Justice nonprofit. And this program has provided monthly income supplements. It's been helping Black and Pacific Islander women in San Francisco for the first 6 months of their babies' lives. Why do you believe this was necessary? It was necessary to support this program in the midst of COVID-19. And what do you hope to obtain from this program in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, we look at the data and we talk about the data and we know what the problems are, but oftentimes the solutions don't always work. Many of the studies show that premature birth is a leading cause of infant mortality and has been linked to a number of lifelong conditions, such as behavioral development issues, learning difficulties, chronic diseases. And in San Francisco, Black infants are almost twice as likely to be born premature. Pacific Islander infants have the second highest premature rate, and Black families account for 50% of the maternal deaths and over 15% of the infant deaths, despite representing only 4% of the births. So all this research has been happening for a long time now. And this project, the Abundant Birth Project, gives mothers and their babies a chance to be intentional about seeking and obtaining care in ways that you cannot, even imagine with some of these mothers and the situation they are in financially. Like, the goal is, here's $1,000 a month, even up to 2 years after you give birth. And part of that is to provide additional support and less stress to the mother. There's no strings attached. Of course, we provide prenatal care and other resources and wraparound services. We want healthy babies. We want to help transform and change their lives, but we also want to uplift them. How many times, from my experience, coming encounter with a number of African-American women who are saying, I don't know what to do. I can't have this baby. I don't have any money. This is stressful. I can't go to work. I mean, all of the things that they've had to deal with. And this is just really providing some additional support and trying to get mothers at the beginning stages through what is a very, very challenging time so that they can deliver healthy babies, so that they can start their lives off on the right foot. Because when we talk about Black Lives Matter, Black lives need to matter from the very beginning, including Black mothers who are giving birth to Black children. From the very beginning, it should be really, and Dr. Benjamin probably knows a lot more about the health challenges and issues related to this, but this is where it starts. And this is where we can have a real impact. And for me, I look at the data and I'm like, okay, where's the dollars? What are we going to put towards it? How are we going to make a difference? Because I'm tired of the numbers. I'm tired of the data. Let's make action happen, and let's make sure that we are directly impacting people's lives. And again, not always giving to these nonprofits, but giving directly to the people that we know need the resources the most.
And I'd just like to just echo that the first 6 months is so important to life. And with particularly around breastfeeding, I released a Surgeon General's report on breastfeeding. Please support women who want to breastfeed. It is so important to the baby. The child gets the mother's antibodies and protections, but the child who is exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months of life is less likely to become obese. breastfeeding helps the mother as well. She's less likely to get breast cancer. There's just a tremendous amount of benefits from breastfeeding, and you can look up the Surgeon General's report on breastfeeding. But it's a simple thing that we can give that child that start in life that lasts throughout their entire lives. So
that's amazing feedback. And I think what we're starting to see is a bit of a pattern here too, where a lot of you are leaders of industry. And I think what you're doing is you're using your power in the most effective way possible. But I want to take a minute to pivot a little bit and throw a little bit of a curveball, because I know in order to promote the change we really want to see, sometimes we need to be in a position to make impactful decisions. And I know that people oftentimes are more receptive to others who can enact change because of the influence or the role that they're in. However, people of color usually lack those positions of power. So what I want to do is open up to the panelists the following question and start with Brian. Brian, in your opinion, is there anything we can do to help such individuals develop a voice? The people that don't have a voice, how can they start to build that voice?
Well, before I even get into the people that don't have the voice, I think that when we have people in office like Mayor Breed, we have to support them. And I'm not just talking about with votes. I'm talking about when they're doing things in the community, we have to go out and show up and help out. We have to do those small things, and they all matter. We have to, when people are, even if Chris has a celebrity day in Atlanta, we got to support that. We have to go out there and make sure that we're active in our communities. That helps the voices that we do have continue to be louder and continue to be more helpful to others. But the other thing I think that we have to realize is that almost everybody listens to money. I mean, they just do. That's just the way things are. And if we could find a way to make sure that we make stronger contributions in things that matter to almost everybody in our economy, such as like our finances, such as entrepreneurship, even with the program that Mercedes and myself are a part of, that Mercedes has headed and I'm a part of with Lightspeed, putting money into the hands of minorities so they can invest in entrepreneurship, making sure that we have the money in our own community to say, listen, you guys go start something and help the community that you came from. That's really important. It's important that we make sure that we don't just take our money from our communities and go move to the suburbs and forget about our people. We have to continue to invest there and continue to pull people up. I mean, it's an old saying that we got, you reach back over the fence and you pull somebody up, but it's true. We have to enable these people to have the decision-making power. We have to enable these people to have a voice, and you don't have to be rich to have a voice. You just have to be strong in your convictions and making sure that you're serving the right people. If you can do that, then I think you can help a lot of people, and that goes, from rich to poor along the way. That's, I think, would be a good start for all of us.
That's an extremely strong piece of feedback, because I think it's a misconception that you have to have prestige. You have to have that money or that power to have a voice or even develop a voice, but that's not true. It really just, it comes down to a matter of having those sort of deep-seated convictions to really sort of practice what you preach.
Yeah. And I just want to add something to take a step further, man, of what he's saying. It's like supporting Black business, as we have seen a lot of individuals start doing a lot more of and being very aware of it. And you have that voice when people come together, like, we are stronger together than we are apart. So when we start understanding our economic values and really where we spend our dollar, our voice becomes heard a lot more, going towards what he's saying about money. But like you just said, all of these things come together. So make sure that we support each other and make sure we're very aware of that. And I think that we're already on a great start because of the events that have happened recently in terms of moving forward in that direction. So I'm very optimistic about what's going on and what can continue to change.
That's great feedback, Chris. Chris, let me ask you a quick question, because, one of the things we're also talking about in general is how to be an effective communicator. And I know we live in a world that has never been more divided. So it's really common to see people with like different beliefs and value systems fighting with each other, right? It's almost as if sometimes you can draw a line in the sand, 50% on the left, 50% on the right, and it's okay for both of those groups not to communicate with each other, because that's the world we live in. So my question for you is that, do you have any advice for the viewers on how we can encourage dialogue and promote positive change in an environment that is difficult to navigate, where people are in a position now where their guards are up, right? So how do we break that barrier? Because it is really hard, even if you have a platform, even if you have a voice, to communicate effectively. How do we do that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And like I said, I think that, even having this Kid Nation platform and me speaking earlier about creating conversation, leading with love, I think is going to be the answer to a lot of different things, man, because there are opinions and then there are facts. So I think we getting into a world where people are starting to, you don't know what's opinion and what's fact anymore. And we have to get back to understanding what is opinion and what's fact, and that everyone has an opinion, and that it's okay when you create these dialogues. And I just think that we will educate ourselves, and as long as we are empowering and educating our children with the help of each other and some of the things that we have going on, and just trying to keep them in a safe bubble, because that's another issue in terms of the kids. Right. It's like they can go on the internet and see and hear anything right now. So, it's like that's again, like I'm trying to do something in which I have, at least to a degree, a safe bubble that kids want to go to. So I think it's there's many answers to that, but hopefully I'm just giving some insight, because I don't think there is one particular answer that can answer that question. But here are some suggestions in terms of what I feel like we need to do. Because that thing about facts and opinions is probably the biggest thing going on right now. Kids just don't know. They don't know what to think. and I don't know if you guys saw, there's a something on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. Mm-hmm. And it's literally trying specifically to cloud people's the difference between fact and opinion, because it just keeps people engaged and keeps people online. And that's really what they want. They want our phones to take over so that we're not thinking as much for ourselves. So I hate to be long-winded, but I want to encourage independent thinking and positive thinking and factual thinking. That's what I feel.
And Chris, I would say those teachable moments, that we don't miss those teachable moments when we see something, that we encourage kids to question things and identify the issue and the problem, but then go beyond that and just come up with some solutions. Don't just complain. We all can complain, but how are we going to solve them? And with Brian, you were saying we need to reach back and bring others up with us. I had never seen a Black doctor till I got in college. Encourage someone to just be something, go to think beyond themselves, but not just reach back and pull them up, but also push them out in front of you and let them know you got their back, that you're gonna continue. And I call it leading from behind, but just make sure we reach back and pull people up, and then we stay behind them and keep pushing them.
Absolutely.
I want to add something to that, because one of the things that we have to get back to is being responsible for other people's kids. Because when I was growing up, everyone could tell me what to do, from the folks, the Christians and the mothers in the church. I didn't like it, but they could tell me what to do. And I think that we can't be uncomfortable or nervous about talking to children who deserve to be communicated to around some message or a question they might have, because we can't take for granted that all kids have fathers or mothers. I mean, my grandmother raised me, and my grandmother was, tough. She didn't mess around, but at the same time, like most of the kids I grew up with, there weren't a lot of fathers around. And so there were a few fathers in the neighborhood that were kind of okay, but then most of them had other challenges. And so I think that we still felt like there was a community of people who we felt responsible to. And I think that's where we need to get to, is making sure that it's not just about our children, it's about other people's kids. It's about being mentors and opening up ourselves to, the challenges of working with teenagers. And like, I have kids that I used to work with that are adults that still drive me crazy, but they know they can reach out to me and call me, which they do on a regular basis. And so I feel like, that's something we got to get into, because what I see, is oftentimes a lot of these kids do get wrapped up in, some of the myths, thinking that some of the life that they're living around using guns against other kids they grew up with, or some of those experiences, they think that that's okay, and they don't know the difference because they didn't grow up being taught that there was a difference. And we take that for granted. We take for granted that someone is at home helping them through this process, helping them reassure them and support them and uplift them. So we got to get back to some basics here. We got to get back to like our old school upbringing of, you know, I mean, I would say whoopings, but my staff a mayor can't say whoopings. We can't talk about whoopings. But the fact is, you know, there was just more discipline, more, you know, but also people invested in us. I'm only here because people invested time in helping me to learn right from wrong. There was so much time that went into supporting me. And I think that's what we're missing also, and why these conversations sometimes are taking a turn for the worse.
That's amen to that. Great points all around, because at the end of the day, like you said, whether there are kids or not, we have to take that responsibility, that accountability. We just got to step up. And I think this conversation, I think, has been very enlightening for all of our viewers. But that's the final question, and that officially concludes our town hall. I wish we had more time. I wish we had like 5 more hours to just have this conversation, because it's awesome, absolutely fantastic. But we'd like to thank all the viewers at home and the panelists for taking time out of their busy day to attend the event. And we hope this is the first of many events like this in the future. And last but not least, we want to make sure we thank our sponsors, Lightspeed Venture Partners and KidNation, for making this town hall possible. And remember, let's keep the conversation going, and have a good night. Thanks, guys, and hope to talk to you guys soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Turn it off.